You're listening to PetLifeRadio.com.
Is your pet stressed out? Does your pet need annual vaccines? Which pet is best for a child? Would you know if your dog was in pain? Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor, where you'll learn everything about keeping your pet healthy and happy. From pet care, pet meds and grooming, to pet food, pet insurance, and dental care, this is the place to find out everything there is to know about pet wellness. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets, because it's your pet. Health matters. Please welcome your Pet Doctor host, veterinary media consultant and veterinarian, Dr. Bernadine Cruz.
You may have heard of the butterfly effect. It basically states that seemingly inconsequential alterations in one event can have a major impact in the long-term behavior of an entire system. The butterfly that I'm referring to today is the health of wildlife and the environment in which they live. Most people would say they want to save the panda and the baby harp seals, but what's so important about that nondescript fish, wolves that prey on livestock, or the myriad of other inhabitants of the wild that aren't so cute and cuddly? My guest today is Dr. David Jessup. He is the Senior Wildlife Veterinarian for the Department of Fish and Game Marine Wildlife Veterinary Care and Research Center in Santa Cruz, California. We'll discuss how veterinarians are helping to protect the health of Mother Nature by caring for animals, humans, and the environment itself. We'll be right back.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Hey, ready to take a walk? Not just you, but the whole family. It's the 2009 Whisker Walk, Sunday, June 7th from 11 to 3 at the Lancaster Fairground in Lancaster, Massachusetts. Pet owners and animal lovers walk to lend a paw to benefit the animal shelters and pet charities they love. Come see exhibits, demonstrations, educational programs, special attractions, product giveaways, entertainment, auctions, raffles, food, fun, and things for adults and kids to see, do, and buy, both human and pet related. Whisker Walk 2009, a fun day for everyone. For more information, log on to whiskerwalk.org.
Thinking about buying a monkey? How about a ferret or a skunk? Then check out the show that will answer the burning questions: where do you get them? What do you feed them? How do you take care of them? And most of all, what were you thinking? With exotic pet expert and author Bob Tart. Every week on demand from PetLifeRadio.com. Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to the Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Dr. Jessup, you have the job that I think every veterinarian as a little kid in their heart would say, oh, I would love to do this. How did you get involved in this? You know, most people think of the companion animal veterinarian such as myself, or maybe somebody taking care of livestock. How did you get into wildlife medicine?
Well, I knew when I graduated from veterinary school that I just wasn't real interested in practice and was very interested in the kind of the mysteries, the solving of disease riddles in species where we knew a lot less about them. And I had worked for researchers at Washington State University, where I went to vet school, who had bears and deer and fish and things like that. So I was just real interested in trying that. There were only about 4 or 5 veterinarians working with free-ranging wildlife when I graduated from vet school, but I kind of hoped, well, I didn't hope one of them would get sick or die or anything, but I hoped there'd be a job maybe there for me at some point. And a year later, an opportunity arose. The California Department of Fish and Game decided to hire its first wildlife veterinarian, and I interviewed for the job, and I was young and dumb and it worked cheap, and so they hired me.
And you're still there, and I'm sure much smarter than you used to be. Is this a field that veterinarians, you said, you haven't graduated all that long ago. How long have veterinarians been involved in this type of protecting the health of the environment?
Really only about 35 years. it really is a relatively young field, probably one of the younger ones in the veterinary profession.
And right now, you said there was 4 to 5 when you first graduated. How many veterinarians are now involved in wildlife medicine?
There are about 120 to 130 whose full-time or close to full-time jobs in the United States are involved in conservation and management of wildlife.
Now, it would seem almost impossible. Here you are out in the wild, and of course, never touch the bear, never touch even the little chipmunk for fear of diseases and things that can happen. But how do you take care of wildlife out in the field?
Well, the wildlife veterinarian doesn't go out and grab all the critters all the time either. When we intervene, it's usually a very well-planned intervention, or it's the result of a catastrophe or some health problem that requires immediate intervention. So it's something that occurs under fairly defined circumstances.
When you have these circumstances, it would seem as though you're putting yourself in great harm's way. What are the ways that you help to protect yourself, because you are working with wild animals?
Well, there are a couple of things that you need to worry about. One is you need to be kind of up on your vaccinations. There is increased risk of being exposed to rabies, of being exposed to steel finger, infections like that, tick-borne diseases and vector-borne diseases. You're out, where those things are a little more prominent. If you do post-mortem work, you may get animals with tularemia or plague or things like that. You need to be, fairly conscious of the fact that you're at increased risk of exposure. And then when you're working with wild animals, animals like bears, mountain lions, things like that, of course, we generally rely on those wonderful anesthetic drugs we now have, and don't attempt to do anything too crazy with them.
You've mentioned, these tick-borne diseases and such, and I think that's one of the areas that the listeners may not always appreciate. You're out having a picnic, maybe in the mountains, the foothills someplace, and there's this cute little chipmunk, cute little squirrel, and it's not all that afraid of humans because it's been fed before. And you think, I can just go ahead and give it a little bit of my sandwich, and it's willing to come and take it from your hand, and it seems quite tame. You had also mentioned things like tularemia and bubonic plague. How do these all fit together?
Well, there are areas of the United States and Canada where we have endemic plague. I happen to live in one of them. And there are areas where we have relatively high prevalence of tularemia or other diseases of concern. Hantavirus would be another one. As far as people handling animals, it's really not a good idea being close to them. And it's not just because of the diseases that ticks and fleas may transmit. When you feed animals, you acclimate them to people, that they lose their fear of people. They are much more likely to then get killed by cars, dogs, other animals. They're likely to come in contact with people and maybe mistake your finger for a carrot and bite you, and then people are upset and need to start worrying about their exposure to various diseases. And sometimes agencies respond then by suppressing the population, which is polite for killing back some of them. So it's a good idea to admire them at a distance, but not to feed them and not to get close to them, because it's really not going to probably work out for them or for you.
I remember as a child, I used to go to Yosemite National Park in California, and they would have the large trash dump. And I would go with the family. We were in our car, and there'd be all these bears all over, and we'd roll down the window and throw out food to the bears, and we just thought that was great fun. And now we realize that that was not in their best interest, because then, as you said, all these bears became very accustomed to people going through their campsites and running into a lot of problems. So I'm sure many of those populations were cut back some, as you said.
Yeah, unfortunately, when bears get acclimated to people and start breaking into tents and breaking into cars, they may try relocating them once or twice, but it's very well documented that they come right back to where they were and go right back to doing what they were doing once they become habituated, and usually that means the animal is euthanized. In fact, it's been shown that mother bears who are used to bumming off of people or scavenging from tents and things like that teach their cubs to do the same thing. So it's just really not acceptable anymore. And parks and various organizations have done a much, much better job. I mean, everything from eliminating the dumps entirely to developing what are supposed to be bear-proof trash cans. But a good friend of mine says, we were talking about how smart bears are. He says, if they had opposable thumbs, we'd be the ones working through the trash cans.
I know I just recently got back from Alaska and from the Yukon Territory, and we were in this one campsite. It was on the Yukon River, and they had these huge bear-proof boxes. I tried to open one. I couldn't get into the thing going, all right, yes, I can see that this may be a bit of a challenge for a bear. When you're talking about the wildlife, and I know that you are working for the Department of Fish and Game, who basically, you have a situation such as myself. I'm in the suburbs of Southern California. Periodically, a bobcat or something is spotted, and everyone's, totally panicked. Well, who do they call? Who owns these wild animals?
Well, in North America and Canada, the wildlife really belongs to the people. It is owned in common by the people, and it's managed by different agencies of government. The native wildlife of a state, for example, is managed by the State Game and Fish Agency. The marine mammals are managed by the National Marine Fisheries Service with some input from the Marine Mammal Commission. The migratory birds and the endangered species are the responsibility of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So agencies of government, you can look at them as sort of like clients that are responsible for a herd of horses or a herd of cattle, and the animals are essentially owned in common.
When you have so many agencies involved in taking care of so many different animals, it seems like it must be a bureaucratic nightmare for someone such as yourself trying to tend to the health needs of these animals. How do you start cutting across all of these bureaucratic red lines?
Well, the lines are pretty well drawn. For example, I know that all native wildlife is the responsibility of the agency I work for. I know that all marine mammals fall under the National Marine Fisheries Service. I think the nightmare is for people. It's for people who, they don't know whether it's a seal or a sea otter. They don't know who National Marine Fisheries Service is or who Department of Fish and Game is. And they don't know that, fish and game agencies don't generally come out and pick up dead raccoons in their backyard. That's, often done either by animal control or not at all. So I think we who work on wildlife have a lot better understanding of that. It's a lot less confusing than for the general public and for the veterinary practitioner. You
were talking about all of a sudden there is that dead raccoon. I try and, because I'm in an area that does back into some fairly wild areas, as wild as you can be in Southern California, to tell people, not to leave food out for their pets because raccoons, etc., will come up. And, be aware of changes in behavior. If you see a skunk that typically would be shying away from people but now coming up to you, it could be ill. What are some of the signs that people could look for an ill wildlife, and what should they do? Well,
as far as illness, it's pretty much the same way you diagnose illness in other animals. If their behaviors are inappropriate, if they're unable to walk and ataxic, if they're vomiting or have diarrhea, those are all things that happen to wildlife as well as to domestic animals. As far as what to do, generally, first of all, don't pick it up and take it in your house. And call, usually in most areas of California, animal control is the first to get the calls, and if they are unable to deal with it, the State Game and Fish Agency would be the next call.
So we're talking now about animals that we'd see maybe in our suburban backyards, but you're also treating other animals that are far removed from the human populations, like bighorn sheep or a pack of wolves. What allows you to realize that there is a medical problem going on, and how would you address that?
Well, with large free-ranging species, generally it is either the result of population counts that show the numbers are down, or the distribution of them is inappropriate, or that their condition is bad, or it's the result of dead bodies, of a die-off, and then investigation starting with postmortem and moving from there maybe to sampling of the population.
How would you go ahead and treat them? So they're having a die-off maybe because of some disease they've picked up. I don't know, a chronic wasting disease that they have right now in some of the hoof stock, the elk and...
Well, chronic wasting disease, because it's a prion disease, is untreatable. Let me use maybe a different example, like pneumonia in bighorn sheep.
All right.
First of all, of course, if we're called in and there are still sick animals that could benefit from treatment, we may attempt to treat those animals. In the case of pneumonias of bighorn sheep now, we're using some of the very long-lasting third-generation cephalosporins that have a week or so of release time. Really what we tend to focus on at the population level, though, is finding out how the disease process got into the herd and what can be done about it. It's more like feedlot medicine, where you're trying to find out what are the risk factors, what are the causal agents, and how can you better manage the population to either decrease their contact with it or decrease the stresses that allow that agent to surface and cause disease.
What would be some of the stresses? I mentioned at the top of the hour about here you have a veterinarian who's helping the animals, helping the humans, and helping the environment. What are some of the stresses? Are people is that one of the biggest stresses right now on wildlife, this human population?
Well, in many ways, yes. Let me use an example close to home here. I've been working for about the last 12 or 14 years on sea otters, not only in Monterey Bay near where I live, but the sea otter population really spreads from about Santa Barbara up to San Francisco. And the biggest causes of mortality in sea otters over the last 10 years or so have been infectious diseases and parasites and intoxications. And several of those are traceable either directly or indirectly to anthropogenic inputs, human activities associated with marine environment. For example, two causes of encephalitis in sea otters are Toxoplasma gondii and Sarcocystis neurona. And a whole variety of experiments I don't have time to discuss now, and field research have shown that those appear to be associated with land sources, that they're associated with places where water comes into the ocean, and that they are concentrated in shellfish, and that they're the result of the shedding of oocysts from cats in the case of toxo, and Sarcocystis, the definitive host, is opossum. So these are essentially forms of biological pollution that are coming from the land to the water. Opossums were introduced by people into California. They're not native to California. And of course, although we have bobcats and mountain lions historically in California, the density of cat populations are 10 to 100 times higher as the result of all the cats that we have. So there's one anthropogenic human source input. Another big problem with sea otters is that here in California they have 50 to 100 times higher blood levels of PCBs, DDTs, PDBEs, several other persistent organic pollutants. Those, of course, are all directly tied to various things that we're putting into the environment. Another cause of mortality are harmful algal blooms. Actually, there's a couple of types now. And these appear to be associated with phosphate and nitrate inputs into nearshore environments. Again, these phosphates and nitrates are primarily associated with street runoff, farm runoff, use of fertilizers, waste treatment plants, water treatment plants, sewage. So these are things that either from the traditional point of view of pollution or the concept of pathogen pollution are causing major mortality in a population and are directly the result of human activities. Interestingly enough, most of these have a human counterpart in terms of causing disease. So the sea otters are acting as a terrific sentinel of our degrading of the nearshore marine environment with pathogens and pollutants that are harmful to us.
Wow. I'm talking right now to Dr. David Jessup. He is a senior veterinarian at the Department of Fish and Game. I have to get this whole title for you correct. The Department of Fish and Game Marine Wildlife Veterinary Care and Research Center in Santa Cruz, California. We'll be right back after the short message, and then we'll learn about Olive the otter, who is just, when you see that, you're going, we need to change what we're doing because we are affecting these wonderful animals and in the same time affecting our own health. We'll be right back.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Greetings, human. What planet am I on?
Welcome to Pet Planet. Here's a copy of Pet Planet Magazine, Florida's most informative and fun pet resource magazine. It features heartwarming stories and informative articles from local and national pet experts.
Excellent.
Pet Planet Magazine offers Operation Planet Rescue, helping rescued pets find new homes. And it's available at 500 locations in South and Central Florida and 24/7 on the internet at petplanetmagazine.com. If you're out and about with your pet, you may be featured in Paparazzi, candid pictures of you and your pet. For up-to-date pet-friendly events, activities, and pet-related services and products, Pet Planet Magazine is your final destination.
I shall take this magazine home with me.
Back to your home planet?
No, to my condo in Boca.
Pet Planet Magazine. Check them out at www.petplanetmagazine.com or 352-394-8578. It's out of this world.
Coast to coast and around the world, it's Oh Behave with Arden Moore. Find out why cats and dogs do the things they do and get the latest buzz from wagging tongues and tails in Rin Tin Tinseltown. From famous pet experts and best-selling authors to television and movie stars, you'll get great tail-wagging pet tips and have a fur-flying fun time. Oh Behave with America's pet edutainer, Arden Moore. Every week on demand. This is the place for a special paparazzi treat. Only on PetLifeRadio.com. Let's talk pets on PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to the Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Dr. Jessup, I think people would have no concept that something like our cats in their kitty boxes could somehow affect sea otter. I think that is just devastating. I had an opportunity to go on YouTube and see Olive the otter. Could you give information about Olive?
Well, Olive, the young female otter that came to us February 21st, as a result of the fact that she was covered, about 50% of her body was covered with tar and oil. She'd been picked up initially by the Marine Center and taken to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is part of our sea otter stranding protocol. And the Monterey Bay Aquarium realized that she was oiled and tarred and called us because we're funded for oil spill prevention and response, and in fact our facility has that as a primary responsibility. They also knew that we'd just finished 3 years' worth of work, 3 years' worth of research on improving the ways we can wash sea otters to get much better results when they do get oiled. So they called up and said, "Hey, how about trying your new washing techniques on this sea otter?" And we said, "Bring her on in."
With this little sea otter, again, having a chance to go to YouTube, and can you tell people where they can find it? It's just YouTube?
Actually, it's Facebook, not YouTube.
Oh, that's right. Excuse me.
If you go to Facebook and you just type in Olive the otter, or even Olive, she pops up sort of as the top choice, and there are videos of her, and there are pictures of her, and there are some infrared photographs showing how her coat is coming back after we washed her, and there's some commentary by me on various aspects of her health and sea otter biology and her future and things like that.
What I found fascinating with looking at it, besides she's the cutest thing in the whole world, the amount of fur that she has, how she keeps herself clean. You think that she's just playing and rolling in the water. In actuality, there's a reason for her grooming herself as much as she does. Some great information on this. But you're talking about sea otters being a sentinel for our health. What have you learned from other animals that we can relate back to our human health, to our environmental health?
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before with the things that cause illness in sea otters have a human health counterpart. And they are sentinels of our degrading the marine environment. I mean, one of the things we hope to avoid here on the West Coast is the same situation as they have now in Chesapeake Bay, where many of the native species are gone, where not only the big species like sea otters and birds are impacted, but even down to the area of shellfish, and where you have blooms of toxic algae going on all the time. We're starting to see increases of that in Monterey Bay, but hopefully we'll be able to avoid that by changing some of our infrastructure and some of our habits.
Some of the habits that we have using the fossil fuels, and people will debate back and forth whether or not global warming is truly occurring. What is your input on global warming?
Well, I think at this point in time, if you can't accept the majority of the science that shows that the climate is in fact changing and that it's warming in some areas and maybe more stormy and more violent in other areas, then I don't know what to say. I really think there's just too much evidence to indicate that that's the problem, and there's certainly a great deal of evidence to indicate that human beings have a lot to do with it. Now, there are certainly other weather cycles and room for debate about how much of it and how fast, but I think to deny global warming at this point is, it's pretty anti-science.
We can imagine how it's affecting, and we can see how it's affecting the wildlife population, the shrinking ice caps, and the polar bears not having enough to eat, having to swim longer distances, and oftentimes not being able to make it to an ice floe to pull themselves out and rest for a while. Do you have any feelings of how this global warming may be affecting our domesticated animals?
Well, no, particularly in the West, but all over the United States, water is becoming a much more critical natural resource. And the city of Atlanta nearly ran out of water last year. We're on water rationing here in California for much of the state because we aren't getting as much as we used to. And that's going to affect both domestic animals and wildlife. Many of our rivers are dammed and most of the water is taken out of them, and in many of them fish can't get upstream anymore. As far as domestic animal users, when they cut off water supplies to farms and ranches that are fed by irrigation, then clearly there's less, water for the livestock, and people in cities are going to have to start thinking about water rationing. Obviously, cats and dogs aren't going to die of dehydration, but people are going to have to be much, much more careful with the water they use. I mean, it's the oil of the next century.
I was reading an article, it was in one of the veterinary journals, and this was from a few years ago, and they were concerned that in Florida they were seeing an increase in the population or they believe there could be an increase in the population of wild cats, feral cats, domesticated cats. And they thought it may not be so much the length of the day, but just the increased temperature and having puberty hit sooner so there are more litters of cats possible to these free-roaming kitties. What's your feeling about that?
Well, free-roaming cats don't need increased daylight to reproduce abundantly. Cats can reproduce to the point that, a small group of cats can become tens to hundreds within, a year or two. So I don't know that you have to invoke day length in order to recognize that free-roaming cats can vastly overpopulate. The other thing is, as long as they're subsidized by people, of course, they can, and don't have to live off the native food supply, they can increase in numbers to concentrations that are many, many times higher than natural predators could. So people that say, well, cats just take the place of natural predators, No, actually, they can swamp the natural predators and drive them completely out. And of course, then you lose your native wildlife. Unfortunately, cats prey on not only native birds but small mammals and reptiles and fish and insects. And they do that not because they're hungry. Their satiety center isn't tied to their need to hunt. So they're very, very destructive introduced species. It's unfortunately one of the things that I think our profession is really falling down in. We've embraced trap, neuter, release as a method of managing feral cats without the recognition that it's extremely damaging to wildlife, and frankly without the recognition that in almost every situation where it's been looked at, trap, neuter, and release doesn't result in the stabilization or decline in numbers of feral cats. It just facilitates increased and continuing abandonment.
So people should really just get their animals spayed, neutered, never let them go into the wild population. What's your feeling about people saying, oh, I have this cute little salamander and now it got bigger and my son or daughter no longer wants this, so I'll just take it down to the local stream and let it go? Yeah, well, release of exotics is really bad. I mean, that's one reason I think they have, was it boa constrictors or pythons now in the Everglades? Right. Because people have released these snakes. They have in Hawaii. They have brown tree snakes that have eaten most of the native birds on Guam. Releasing exotic pets to set them free is a really bad idea. If they wanted to learn more about ways they can help, any suggestions, Dr. Jessup, of where they can go, where they can learn more? Well, there are lots of sources of information. American Bird Conservancy is a good one, National Wildlife Foundation, Nature Conservancy. There are all kinds of great resources. AVMA has a number of good resources. So, there's really no shortage. I would almost be overwhelmed with all the different resources that are available to tell people how they might handle their pet wildlife or their exotic pets. Well, I think this is wonderful, Dr. Jessup. I really appreciate it. I think most people had no idea that veterinarians were so involved in taking care of the environment, not just our cats, dogs, livestock, etc., but very much involved with this One World, One Health, One Medicine initiative. So the goal of the show is to entertain, educate, and motivate you to be the best pet owner that you can be. In this case, maybe being the best person you can be for our environment. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at thepetdoctor@petliferadio.com. Thank you so much, Dr. Jessup, for being with us today. You're very welcome. And have yourself a great week. Come back next week and we'll have more information on how to take care of your pets. I'm Dr. Bernadine Cruz with The Pet Doctor.
Pets can be a wonderful addition to your life. Keeping them healthy and happy is important. Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor with veterinary media consultant and veterinarian Dr. Bernadine Cruz. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets. The Pet Doctor, on demand every week, only on PetLifeRadio.com.